What is the world of The Witcher? How do the books, video games and TV show all fit together? And what do you need to know about the continent before diving in? Let's do a quick introduction to the world of The Witcher. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel you'll find breakdowns, explanations and theories about The Witcher, Lord of the Rings, A Song of Ice and Fire and much more. Welcome. The world of The Witcher is one of the most successful and lauded modern fantasy creations out there. The books have been translated into dozens of languages, the video games, particularly The Witcher 3, are some of the best-selling ever, and the first season of the Netflix TV show remains, despite diminishing returns from later series and spin-offs, one of the biggest hits it has ever had. So where to begin? We should begin with Andrzej Sapkowski, a first-time Polish writer who submitted a short story entitled The Witcher into a short story competition for Fantastica magazine, published in 1986. It came third. Reader response was huge, though, and he followed it up by publishing several more stories featuring the same protagonist, Geralt of Rivia. These short stories were collected into two collections, The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny. Following that came 5 novels, each written and published in about a year, which picked up the story after the short stories left off and became known as the Witcher Saga. A standalone novel, Season of Storms, followed in 2013 and another in 2024. At the time of writing this, though, the latest story hasn't yet been officially translated into English. Which brings us straight away to one of the core distinctives of the Witcher world. Yes, modern Western audiences will find much here that resounds with other fantasy worlds we know. A monster hunter, magic users, elves, dwarves, dragons, and much more. But this is very much a Polish creation, drawing inspiration from Central and Eastern European fairy tales. It was only in 2007 that the first official translation of one of the books came out, and the whole Witcher saga was not published in English until 2017. There are stories, collections, a TV show, a film and more in Polish, all created before the explosion in interest around the world. This is a larger world than most English-only speakers will be aware of. This expansion in interest in the world was driven by the release of the first Witcher game in 2007, its sequel, Assassins of Kings, in 2011, and The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt in 2015. They were all, especially Witcher 3, massive hits. The last time I checked sales of The Witcher 3, they exceeded 50 million. The plot of those video game stories, though, was not from Andrzej Sapkowski, although they are very sympathetic to the world and lore and take place after the end of the book series as a sort of semi-canon addition rather than contradiction to the main story. Interest grew further. Netflix bought the rights to make a TV show from the source materials, and Season 1, starring Henry Cavill as the eponymous Witcher, debuted in 2019. It swiftly became a huge hit, Netflix's most watched ever original series at the time, though it has since lost that crown to Squid Game. Seasons 2 and 3 followed, and at the time of writing, Seasons 4 and 5 are being filmed, this time with Liam Hemsworth as Geralt. Spin-offs spun off with varying degrees of success, and again Andrzej Sapkowski confirmed that the stories were based on his own, but he had stayed out of writing and production. Nerds like me may debate the lore on these things, and the lore in some of the TV shows veers a long way from the books, but there is no doubting that what began as a third-placed story in a Polish magazine's competition has become a global phenomenon, and it shows no sign of slowing down. As I write this, we still have 2 more seasons of the TV show, plus possibly a couple more spin-offs. A new trilogy of video games is on the way, and the original is being remade. Andrzej Sapkowski has even teased more original stories. So, what is the world of The Witcher? It is set in what we know as the continent, which was not originally a home for humans. We may now be the dominant race, but that was not always the case. Once, thousands of years ago, the only sentient population of the continent were gnomes, who were followed by dwarves, then, sometime later, elves. These 3 races, the elder races, still exist on the continent, albeit in much reduced numbers, and are often sidelined and discriminated against by the now dominant humans. We're not told where these 3 races came from, other than that the elves arrived on white-sailed ships from the west, but no one doubts that they arrived before humans and the conjunction of the spheres. Talking of which, the conjunction of the spheres is perhaps the pivotal moment in the history of the continent, indeed of the whole Witcher cosmos. We haven't yet been told all the whys and wherefores, but somewhere around 1500 years before the stories we read, many different realms or dimensions collided, rifts between them were opened, and hundreds of different races and creatures poured through into the continent. Most importantly, humans did too, as well as many of the monsters we see in the world today. Much is made in the books about how these monsters, not having originated on the continent, tend not to have any ready-made ecological niches there, hence them remaining few in number and not quite fitting in with the world, although some have now adapted, usually with quite grisly results. Humans, though, adapted very quickly to their new environment. The first two distinct cultures of humans on the continent, however, the Dok and the Vosgor, were overtaken by later arrivals, the Nordlings, who arrived, like the elves, on boats over a few years starting in the 760s, so half a millennium before our stories. At which point, we should probably just briefly note that the dates in the Witcher world use as a base year 0 not the conjunction of the spheres, but something referred to as the resurrection, around 230 years later. Perhaps there was some kind of Christ figure around then, but we simply don't know. It's not referred to in any detail in any of the books, and whatever did happen then seems not to have had much impact on the rest of history or the story. All in all, a bit of a mystery. As is a lot of the continent's history. Andrzej Sapkowski has resisted the temptation to do a Silmarillion equivalent, or even publish an official map. What we know comes from in-world sources who may or may not know the truth themselves, and are almost certainly biased. It's a key part of understanding how this world is presented. It's a time of legend and story, not historical fact. The books themselves may start as quite straightforward tellings of one man's adventures, but by the end are much more of a tapestry of perspectives, stories told in song or around campfires, paintings of events, even lectures given decades later. The reader is invited to understand the importance of story, not just factual retellings of events. But returning to the arrival of the Nordlings in the continent, they spread rapidly, founding kingdoms, most notably Redania, Temeria, Cadwin and Aedirn. In doing so, they faced opposition, of course, from the elder races who were already living there. The elves, dwarves and gnomes were pushed back further and further. One king would make a promise to respect a border and another would break it. Many of the dwarves and gnomes, along with halflings and werebubs, finally retreated to Mahakam, a mountainous vassal state, though some did stay and live among humans, mostly peacefully, if rarely treated as equals. The elves had built many magnificent palaces and settlements before the arrival of humans, and though they were forced to abandon and destroy them in their long retreat, many of these were built on by the humans to make their cities. Novigrad, Oxenfurt and Sintra are all built on previous elven constructs. Around 200 years before our stories, many of the younger elves fought a last desperate battle against the humans. They lost, and now the long-lived elves live even more on the fringes of society, often far from humans in mountainous reaches or deep forests. The other opposition that faced the humans were the monsters that had arrived during the conjunction of the spheres. While many could be avoided by building town walls and establishing city militia, people could never be completely safe, so the Order of Witchers was established. Genetically mutated, magically enhanced warriors who would roam the land killing monsters for a fee. They were successful over a long period of time, and eventually became subjects of fear and hatred themselves, leading to the destruction of the Witcher stronghold Kaer Morhen. Some Witchers did survive, though, and our entry into this world is through the eyes of the Witcher Geralt of Rivia. By the time of our stories, Witchers are rare, relics of the past, still needed, for not all of the monsters have been eliminated, but reviled more than they are revered. The other thing that entered the continent with the conjunction of the spheres was magic, or chaos to be more exact, at least according to most magic users. However, this magic now seems to be found mostly in nature. Most magic users seem to naturally favour one or other of the elements, fire magic, for example, or water magic. Such is the amount of magic in nature that many other non-magical people can be taught simple magic spells or tricks. The Witchers, for example, use simple magic called signs that can be done with a gesture of one hand during combat, say, to push an opponent away or shoot flames, for example. But to be really good at magic, you need to be a source, someone with innate magical power. Because magic is chaos, and those without training in how to control it could do themselves and others great damage, particularly at a time of stress. The Nordlings set up magical training schools, Banad for men and Aretuza for women. There followed various rulings about what magic users can and are not allowed to do. Once a wizard has been trained, though, some head out into the world to pursue whatever goals they wish. Some go into magical research, others earn money and live a life of luxury, and still more become advisors to kings and queens. Wizards and witches do come together to decide on joint positions on matters of great import, but as often as not, they operate on their own. Wizarding politics can be more backstabbing and convoluted than even kingly politics. Other routes into magic exist, of course, some coming from creatures arriving on the continent through the conjunction of the spheres. Others, like druids, base themselves in nature, and still more are religious in nature. Religion does play an important role in The Witcher, with the Nordlings having a pantheon of different gods, notably Melitele, or Melitele, everyone seems to pronounce that one in a different way, the goddess of fertility, life and birth. The main temple of Melitele plays a prominent early role in the books. As well as various other cults which spring up and die down, there is also the imperial cult of the Great Sun in Nilfgaard, the Great Southern Empire. Which brings me to the last great important bit of background to what is going on in the stories of The Witcher. The wars and politics that form the background to the tale. In the north of the continent, where most of our story is set, there are several kingdoms and city-states. Some are very powerful, like Redania and Temeria, and others less so. They have a long history of bickering and battling and border disputes between themselves, and none have ever really claimed control over all of the others. But to the south, one empire has been slowly taking over its neighbours one by one. Nilfgaard. It has a strong economy, a large army, and a talented and ambitious emperor in Emhyr var Emrys. And now the Nilfgaardian Empire has set its sights on the north. War looms. So let's bring all of this together. The world of The Witcher is undoubtedly a grim one, and it is fully rounded out, mixing high fantasy with the gritty realities of life. We see the politicking of the nobility as well as the struggles of the farmers, labourers and ordinary folk. And in between, there are 1,000 traders, inns, auction houses, lawyers and local council officials, and mercenaries, all navigating the economic freedoms and bureaucratic restrictions of the land. Some early reviews of The Witcher stories saw them as critiques of the restrictions, uncertainties and economic freedoms of post-Cold War Eastern Europe, and it's easy to see why, though the writer has firmly asserted that he is not political. When you add in the discontent and righteous anger of the elder races, intolerance of humans, religious fanaticism and the ever-present threat of war, this is a complex world where each new settlement brings new dangers. This is not a medieval world, so much as one teetering on the edge of Renaissance, Reformation or apocalypse. Contradictions and tensions abound. Academics research new technologies while dark prophecies stir up the masses. Kings rule with absolute power while free traders operate as they wish, often outside the law. Monsters hunt the innocent while the witches who slay them are shunned. Into this strides Geralt, a genetically mutated fighter who can cast simple spells and wanders from village to village, city to city, following his own moral code while vanquishing the monsters that still plague the troubled land. Other characters emerge. Yennefer, a witch and Geralt's lover, though is theirs a true love or the result of messing with powerful magic? Jaskier, or Dandelion, his name changes in different adaptations, a bard who sticks close to Geralt for the stories his exploits bring, but may also be his truest friend. And Ciri, a young girl on whose fate much will hinge. Other characters also bubble to the surface, more witches and wizards, dwarves and elves, kings and common folk. On the face of it, The Witcher is about a monster hunter in a dark world, a mutant freak paid to kill other mutant freaks. But the world of The Witcher is so much more. We sometimes overuse the idea that a story may be subverting fantasy expectations, but personally, I found that to be absolutely true here. Casual viewers, gamers and readers may see Conan light, a mighty warrior against the world, but Geralt himself, though a monster hunter, is literate, reflective, and constantly questioning the morality of the situation he finds himself in. True love, fate, and destiny themselves are repeatedly questioned, and although we are introduced to the world through his eyes, it slowly becomes apparent that he is not the central or most important character here. He has an important role in this tale, but it is not just about him. And it's not just a story. It's a story about stories, their value and importance in the world, all while we enjoy the tales of a kick-ass fighter and his friends in an immaculately conceived fantasy world. And most urgently, in this complex and dangerous world named for a famous monster hunter, we are constantly being asked, who here are the real monsters? If you'd like to see more introductions to great fantasy and science fiction worlds, there's a link to that playlist appearing now on the left of your screen. Or if you'd like to dive deeper into the world of The Witcher, I have a playlist on that too in the middle of your screen, starting with a breakdown of what actually is a Witcher. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.